we're talking about the chart of the moment. This is October 29th. We're going to look at the month of November to help you feel connected and mapped so that you can deal with this month ahead. This is Heather Rowan Robbins. This is Starcast and a map ahead. But then we're going to pull on Lisa Stardust, an astrological writer that's been in Vogue and Oprah Daily and the Today Show, and bring her in to talk about the astrological pop culture of the moment and what she sees in Mercury retrograde, the new moon, the full moon, and how people are using astrology now. But first, let's talk about this chart. We've just been through a very swamping and intense grand trine in water signs. We see this grand trine with Mercury and Mars were conjunct in Scorpio, trine Jupiter, which expands whatever it touches, down to Saturn and Neptune. And Saturn and Neptune together tend to dissolve structures. They dissolve security systems. We're seeing that now in the dissolving of some of our governmental support systems, the SNAP foods. We're seeing that in the hurricane that just came through Jamaica. Here is the Jamaican chart. And again, with the chart says 12 o'clock. It doesn't say AM or PM, but since most legal entities begin at midnight for that day, I did it for midnight. So this is the chart of Jamaica, and we're feeling for it as the pictures are really coming in this morning. And with the sun in Leo, moon in Libra, Taurus rising, a very Venusian part of the world. Right now, the moon conjunct Saturn by progression. This is the progressed ring out. So we see a restructuring, a rebuilding of fundamental structures in the country this year. And it's going to be with the moon and Saturn conjunct in Aquarius. I think they're going to need international help, community support within the culture. And it's going to be a powerful reorganization. I think Pluto comes over that Saturn, progressed Saturn, and the natal Saturn over this next year. It's going to take a couple of years to really rebuild from what's happened, and we hope that they serve well. So we're going to come back to today's chart. Now, this morning, Mercury finally left Scorpio and went into Sagittarius, which brings our mind, Mercury, to bigger picture, to a more movement, to room to grow and explore. And hopefully we will find at this time an easy way to communicate, because Mercury in Sagittarius can scatter our mind, as it did mine several times today, but it can also give us breadth and help us unlock some of that shutdown. Now, we've saw that Mercury Mars in Scorpio can give us depth. It can help us. It's a very surgical aspect. It's good for penetrating problems, but it can also lead people to shut down and withdraw emotionally, or shut down and withdraw from the government, as our whole Congress has been trying to do to create pressure in this Solomonic decision. Like, you keep up your insistence on health care, and we will starve the poorest. That's like, I'll cut the baby in half, very Solomonic. And if you don't want the baby cut in half, then you have to give it up. And I feel like that's truly Mars, the worst of the Mars Mercury conjunction in Scorpio. But Mercury's just shifted, and by November 4th, we'll see Mars goes into Sagittarius and can loosen up some of that tension, that stuckedness that we're seeing here. Now, as Lisa and I will be talking about, Mercury turns retrograde on November 9th through the 29th. And we'll see, this is going to be a doozy of a Mercury retrograde. It's going to retrograde back, hits Mars again, and then come forward and go back into Scorpio and linger there. I want to talk about, again, I don't think the political situation has truly shifted until we get Mercury past that Scorpio side well into December. So, um, we also see coming up next week as Mars heads into Sagittarius that it will directly oppose Uranus. Uranus retrogrades back into Taurus on November 7th, but during this time, because we saw uh, five major planets shift signs at the beginning of this year: Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter. Jupiter is moving on. Pluto is not going to retrograde back into Capricorn, but Uranus is about to retrograde back into Taurus. Neptune and Saturn are about to are retrograded back into Pisces, bringing up some of the work we've been doing over the last couple of years and stopping this progress. It gives us a chance anytime a planet goes retrograde, and Mercury's about to, it helps us go back and fix what we haven't. I always think of it like being stopped at the doorway right before you take a trip and saying, "Did I forget my toothbrush? Is the oven off? What did I remember? Did I bring my papers with me that I'm going to need for the talk?" All of that, just check up to see where you are on this. What do you need to finish? What karmic process do you need to finish before you move on? Now, we'll see that kick in all this year. Mercury turns retrograde, but Jupiter also retrogrades. And though it doesn't go back out of Cancer, it's still moving forward, but it's in those water signs. And when we saw that grand trine in water, we saw too much water, quite literally. Whenever there's a preponderance of planets in a sign, in an element, we see too much of that. Too many planets in an air sign, and you can see, filibusters in the Senate and windstorms. Too much earth signs, and you can see log landslides and earthquakes. When the fires were ripping through California, there were many planets and fire signs. So it's just we have to look at what that symbolizes in our own life. We may have felt swamped by our life this month, all throughout October, feeling that swampiness of the grand trine and water signs that helps us get in touch with our feelings, but can leave us somewhat overwhelmed. It can also be the great tide of public opinion. With that grand trine and water signs, we had vision because Saturn and Neptune were conjunct, trine Jupiter, and trining into those planets. That Saturn Neptune said, "What we're dissolving the old forms of stability, but what structure can we give to our new vision? Where can we go with this? How can we take it to the next level?" And that can be very exciting to take that vision and find other people that are working together. Now, throughout this decade and next, Pluto in Aquarius speaks of the need to work together, that only by collaboration will we get anywhere. We've got the Grand Trine at the moment, this Grand Trine, and we're looking at November 9th as Mercury turns retrograde. Um, we have the wonderful, we have Saturn and Neptune in that water sign, trining Jupiter, uh, sextiling Uranus, and sextiling Pluto. Uranus and Pluto will be, and we'll be talking about this a lot for the next 5 years. Uranus and Pluto are forming a grand trine, and they are both sextiling into Neptune, which is a medium grand trine, a smaller one. Those three planets formed a great grand trine. That's three in equal points rather than two sextiles. It's three trines right before the American Revolution, about 2 years before, that really stirred up the vision of what we needed to do. And then it took us a while to do it. So you're going to hear us talk about that small grand trine and the chance to revisit our vision over the next, it's going to happen 5 times between now and 2028. So we're just getting going on this sense of political reform, revisioning, and bringing Pluto in Aquarius to light. So, uh, and so I'm excited about that. We're going to talk about the new moon and the full moon coming up with Lisa, who is here, and she will come on stage soon. I wanted to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving because I'm going to be having another one of these podcasts right before Thanksgiving. So we'll talk about the whole month and the details of Thanksgiving Day. But just a heads up, with Mercury retrograde until the 29th, that weekend, people coming back, Mercury will be stationary. If you want to make your plans, don't make fancy travel plans for Thanksgiving. Make them simple. Remember, with Mercury retrograde, it's good to go back. You might want to go back and reconnect, not comparing your memories to the past, but reconnecting with places that have been important to you, people that are important to you, recipes that were important to you. Just give yourself extra room for all of the travel and work on understanding one another. Now, Thanksgiving is the Sagittarius holiday, the outspoken holiday where people put their foot in their mouth on a regular basis. Mars will be in Sagittarius, and the tendency to kind of speak up and say things, those deadly sentences that start off with frankly, and I just want to be careful to how they unfold this time. Be honest, be clear, but also keep your heart connected to that process. So that's going to be an interesting time when we look ahead. The other points that I wanted to mention next week, as Mars opposes Uranus on November 4th, and then is going to be a tricky time for safety. So I want you to take, as Mars opposes Uranus, watch out for those tendencies to kind of have your temper kick in too strong, to say something that will start a fight. Just add that little bit of tact, add a 5-minute lead on speaking up all throughout this month, but particularly then. And then on Venus retrogrades back, or Venus moves forward into Scorpio on November 6th. And then as she does that, she is going to square Pluto and drop into our hearts. There's something about the sense of loss or awareness of loss. It may be just a heartache. And to let that not just close you down and Scorpio you, but to open your heart into depth and into feeling, to let it stir your compassion rather than shut you down. Mercury conjuncts Mars on the 12th. Speak up, speak clearly, but as we saw that Mercury Mars conjunct right around the No Kings rally, it is important to speak your truth, but don't be baited into uh, negative Mars action, into a fight that is not that you do not feel is necessary. Mercury retrogrades back into Scorpio on the 18th, then directly opposes Uranus. So there may be a shift and a change in mind. Watch a sudden, whenever you have a Uranus aspect, watch for impulsiveness. So with that Mercury Uranus opposition, really think through any sudden decisions that you want to make. Sudden, if you want to, if it's a temporary decision, great. If it's a permanent, if you're really thinking of painting your house fuchsia, give it a minute, think it through. If you really want to walk out of a situation, walk out, but don't walk out for good. Just walk out for the afternoon. Give yourself some room to have a change of scene and a change of a frame of mind. And then it goes on throughout the month. I think there's some nice emotional steadiness as Venus trines Jupiter and Saturn right before Thanksgiving that will help us in that solid emotional place. Saturn turns direct right on right around Thanksgiving on November 27th, and I want you to that will begin to pick up some work projects that have been put on hold for a long time. December looks to be a pretty busy month. So this month, take a deep breath. I'm going to bring Lisa on. Lisa has been wonderful in that she has interviewed me for several of her columns. Hi, Lisa. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm having my own Mercury pre-shadow issues, which is why we're doing audio only. As Heather knows,
Okay.
I have get gotten whiplash from
Oh,
slipping, and then I accidentally have banged myself in the eye while I was sleeping last night, so now I have a black eye.
oh,
So
honey. So
I
yes, we'll do
yes.
visual.
So
We'll do.
I'm a hot mess, but it's okay because speaking of hot messes, we have lots of hot mess astrology to talk about today.
Yeah,
As
you're a great
only
example. You know,
yeah,
it's like
as
do
only
everything with caution, including sleep. Right.
as only a Gemini and Scorpio would. I mean Gemini and Virgo would. So we got this.
You got this. Right. So we're going to start, and I wanted to introduce you. You've been writing astrology for how long?
For about almost 10 years.
Hmm. And you write articles and bring real astrology too. And you mentioned the Today Show, Teen Vogue, Regular Vogue, Oprah Daily, and you've got an article coming out in GQ. And
Yeah.
so you've got kind of a pulse on how astrology is being used these days in the magazines and in the public mind. What do you see shifting at all in
Well,
how we use astrology?
I think that astrology is becoming more of a sensation, as you know. And I think that younger audiences like Gen Z, they know their birth charts by heart. And it's really cool to talk to someone who's, 17 or 18 years old and they know their sun, moon, and rising by heart. So I
Yes, how
think
we say
that,
hello. I always think
yeah,
sun, moon,
exactly.
and rising is how it's like dogs sniff butts. We ask your sun, moon, and rising. We know how to deal with you then. Right. Go ahead.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of people are, really coming to terms, even if you're not a non believer in astrology. I think that, there is something to believing in, the stars and especially Mercury retrograde and eclipses and how, people are so different and how they interpret the world around them and experience relationships and themselves. So it's interesting because even though I did an event last night, and even though there were a lot of Scorpios, they were all different types of Scorpios. A Scorpio with a Sagittarius moon, a Scorpio with a Virgo moon, a Scorpio with an Aries moon. So it's always interesting to see for people to see that even though they're the same sign, they are completely different from one another. So I think that it's really been helpful in people finding their individuality as well.
I agree. I mean, that's why I wrote my book, and I will call it Starcodes, about choice-oriented approach to astrology. That every single point in a chart you have personal choice how you live that out. And one of my favorite movies from many years ago was called Hanussen. It is a Hungarian film, but that it traces the life of one guy who, yeah, pre World War II, he's a Hungarian. He has a special ability to mesmerize and hypnotize people, and he uses it to help people that have been in pain. And then he starts doing an act where he hypnotizes people as part of a stage act until he is killed around Kristallnacht in Germany. And what it comes out in the process is he was born at the same time as Hitler, and he had chosen to use his skills very differently. That chart can talk about your strengths and your weaknesses, but what you do with that Scorpio energy, what you do with your Mercury and Sagittarius, that's free will, choice, and grace. And as you said, I think people are just getting the hang of that. I love some of the humor on, my favorite, cheap pop astrology was subway riders by sign on in New York because they were hilarious, and they pegged each of the signs. But that's only an extreme edge. It's not the depth of astrology that we hope them to take it in. But the more they learn about the sun signs, the whole breadth of possibility around that sun sign, the more they can then look at their own chart and go, oh, how does that help my Venus express itself? What does it help me do understand my temper and how to use it in a healthier way. So I'm really glad to see it becoming so much more familiar than it used to be for people, much more available. So
Yeah,
tell
I
me,
totally agree.
and
Sorry.
Mercury retrograde, I'm got Virgo coming out the wazoo, and you are Gemini, Sun, and Mercury. And so, how does Mercury retrograde affect you? And what are you telling people about this Mercury retrograde?
Well, it's so interesting because I was born during the pre shadow. So my progressed Mercury, I think, had gone retrograde and now it's past that point. But it's interesting because this Mercury retrograde is going to be in Sagittarius and Scorpio. And, Mercury is not a fan of being in Sagittarius. And when Mercury is in Scorpio, as you were saying before, it ignites a lot of, nostalgia, people really wanting to go back to relationships, reassess, dive back in, reconnect. But also, it's happening during the holidays. It's going to be occurring during Thanksgiving when a lot of people come home. So there's a reckoning of the past that's coming for some people. And I think that it could get messy.
Hmm. I agree. And I do think it gets messy, and can get messy in any case. And that Mercury retrograde, um, uh, why it's why it's uncomfortable in Sagittarius for my audience is that it rules Gemini, so the sign opposite the one it rules can feel out of whack. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, but you have to pay more attention to it. It doesn't work the way most people think it works. And I think of Mercury in Sagittarius, I think of Rob Hand, a wonderful older astrologer with an amazing encyclopedic mind with Mercury in Sagittarius. And if you went to his lectures to hear what he said he was going to talk about, you may get frustrated because his mind wandered. But if you went to just go for the ride and see where his mind took you, it took you to amazing places and connected all these pieces and went back in history and, gave you a whole new perspective. But you had to wander with him. And I think that's the Sagittarius, the sign of the wanderer. It is that breadth and view. And while Mercury, it starts retrograde in Sagittarius, it goes back into that focused Scorpio in a bit. With Mercury in Scorpio, we have to watch, and we think of Mercury in Scorpio goes deep like a well. I always think of Pisces as sort of the wetlands, and Cancer more oceanic, and Scorpio like a deep well and underground streams. And when we go down into that depths, how do we get to we have to be careful what we focus upon. Our minds can really hold on to something and chew it. And if it's something we want to chew on, it gives us great concentration to finish projects. Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, where it heads, after, a certain time, I'll get you the time that it goes back into Scorpio. Then on the 18th, is a wonderful time to pull out that old manuscript or, find some unfinished project and really bring it to completion with that focus. But if you don't like what you're obsessing upon, you have to give your mind something else to chew upon, like a dog with a bone, or a toddler that's holding a piece of fragile glass. You can't just take it away. It's like, no, play with this instead. So if your mind starts to obsess on something you don't like, give it something else to chew on. Give it a toy to play with, and give it a project you need to finish, and watch it go to work. Work with it.
It's so interesting because my dad and my sister are both Scorpios, and my sister's Mercury is in Scorpio, and my dad's Mercury is in Sagittarius. And my sister is more of that penetrative, like deep thinker. I'm going to think things through. I'm going to have an intense reaction, but I'm also going to think about my actions. And my father is just very impulsive in how he communicates. And,
True
I've
case.
exactly, yeah. And when, I've always noticed during these retrogrades, especially, during the Scorpio, Mercury and Scorpio retrograde grades that we've had in the past, my sister's more kind of like thoughtful and just more aware of her own decisions and actions, like you said, and really trying to make changes. And, my dad just gets into all of these accidents, or he'll argue with people at the supermarket, and, it's always like act now, think later for Mercury and Sagittarius,
Hmm.
especially when retrograde.
Hmm. They are I think of the foot and mouth disease that, they just shoot
Yes.
off and say the impossible things. But that's also why we've thought that in the story about the emperor who had no clothes, that the whole country had talked the emperor into that this man was producing the finest clothes in the world, but that was an illusion, and that only the best people could see those beautiful clothes, and that only bad people couldn't see them. And so he's parading naked, thinking that he's wearing beautiful clothes, but won't admit that he can't see them. And everybody else is playing along with it. And this has so much to do with what's going on these days. Everybody's saying, sure, yes, because they don't want his judgment that they're no good. Until a little kid goes, but you're naked. And everybody starts to giggle and laugh, and it breaks the illusion. And that is the best of Mercury in Sagittarius and Sun in Sagittarius and Moon in Sagittarius, but particularly Mercury in Sagittarius. Speaking up and saying that not easily spoken. So I'm hoping in this little window now, and then again in December when because Mercury's going to retrograde back from the 9th to the 18th. Mercury is retrograde in is in Sagittarius, but then it goes back into Scorpio until December. And in that time, what politicians will speak up and say, this isn't working. What you're doing is not working. And if they don't say it now, will they say it again later? That this is a chance for people to speak up with honesty with each other. And usually that Sagittarius edge can get away with it when other people can't, because they can speak without such a pointed edge. So I have hopes for that time, and that Sagittarius energy. But if people say something tactless to you, it's not that they don't mean it. It's only a partial truth. They may say that looks ugly, but they're not saying you are ugly. So take everything with a grain of salt while Mercury is in Sagittarius, particularly when it's retrograde.
I feel that now.
Um, I'm going to talk about the full moon. I'm going to pull up the full moon chart, and let's see if I can find that. And here we go. This full moon, it's going to be on November 5th. We're hopping around because Mercury's heading into Sagittarius, so our minds are going all over the place. But this full moon at 13 Taurus, 13 Scorpio, with Mercury and Mars close together in Sagittarius, is going to be pretty powerful. We have an exact trine or almost exact trine between Uranus and Pluto as the background for most of the next couple of years, but particularly now, Uranus is about to retrograde back into Taurus. And this full moon is, I love dearly some people that are born on a full moon, this Taurus full moon, and they are some of the most steady, solid friends I know. And that Taurus full moon asks us what we're hungry for, what we want the taste of, but it can also we can dig in our heels and go nowhere. What are you seeing in this full moon, Lisa?
Well, in particular, I see that the full moon is an aspect to the nodes of destiny, which means
Hmm.
that we're making some karmic decisions. I would probably say about what makes us feel safe and secure because, as we all know, Taurus is a fixed earth sign who really likes to have a strong foundation. They like loyalty, they like responsibility, they like to be rigid, even though they're stubborn at times. So I do think that we are making decisions that are connecting us to others or disconnecting us to others. Um, Mercury and Mars and Sagittarius are forcing us to accept some harsh truths. And the day before the full moon, we also have Mars entering Sagittarius. And then the day after, we have Venus entering Scorpio. So all of these planetary shifts that are coinciding around the same time are actually opening our eyes to see things that maybe we didn't necessarily see before. And because Venus is at a very late degree of Libra, we are making decisions and choices jumping into the next journey around love and money. Also, Venus is via combusta, which means the fiery path, which is certain degrees between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio, except for 22 degrees Libra, which is conjunctive star spica, which is fortunate. So it means that things get a little bit more intense. So, we're hell or high water, we're committing to what we love, where we feel nurtured, what we want to grow, and we're letting go of things that aren't really working for us or aligning with our paths.
Beautifully said. And with that, and then we're moving into the new moon on, um, this is pulling the chart up so I can see it better. The new moon at 28 Scorpio on November 19th, with
Oh,
Mercury would
a
be
rock and
retrograde
rollin'.
back. Yeah, look at that lineup in Scorpio. Mercury will be retrograde, conjunct the sun and the moon in Scorpio. Now, my dad was a new moon in Scorpio, and one of my great mentors was who is president of the Spiritualist Society in New York, is also new moon in Scorpio, like or dark of the moon in Scorpio, both of them, and they had either Venus in Libra or Mars in Sagittarius, something that softened their intentions because they were really good, righteous people. But this one, it doesn't mean, so again, I'm saying all that Scorpio doesn't have to go bad. It has to get focused. Now, my dad with Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus all in Scorpio with a Virgo rising, Mars in Sagittarius, became a mathematician in his early 20s. He never learned to drive a car. He never learned to change a light bulb, but he had his PhD at 24. He was very good at one thing. It was that real focus, and he was quite brilliant at that one thing. So that's the family joke is you take an abstract mathematician and a psychiatric nurse, my mother, put them in a blender, you get an astrologer. but but we have this kind of combination in Scorpio, and it's rocking and rolling because it's directly opposed that Uranus. So I think it really we're going to see some confrontation and loosening up of some difficulties, but I don't see anything about this being flexible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone's really into Black Moon Lilith, but I think Black Moon
Hmm.
Lilith is aspecting this new moon as well. So we're going to see, the clouds of justice, which is Scorpio, are coming out. So, this is a time where, retribution, people are, you know, exposing their truth, saying what's on their mind. It's a powerful time leading, up to it.
Now, looking at down here at the elements, we see there's some fire in there, almost no earth, almost no air, lots of water. Again, we've got a grand trine in water signs. These three planets will be conjunct, trining Jupiter, trining Neptune, and Saturn. We may see another flooding event. We may feel flooded. We may see boundaries, breached between people and organizations. We may see um, and it may be when information comes out that's been hidden. Maybe the Epstein files will be released. Who knows? But it asks us to add the earth by keeping ourselves as grounded as possible. When you're low on something, we need to import it. We want to be whole. We want to be mandalas. So if there's no earth in the sky, we have to be unusually grounded. It helps us to do the practical, to kind of chop wood, carry water, put one foot in front of the other, tend to the practical sides of life, walk on the earth, be offer comfort by helping people with practical stuff, give them a hug, cook them food, help them handle one simple thing, with air, keep the conversation going even if people aren't really ready to talk, with that scorpionic kind of implosion there. uh, just feeling connected and communicating, keeping the channels as clear as possible, will be really important. It's a time when everybody may need to pull into themselves and need time by themselves, and with that Scorpio lineup. And it's easy. One of the problems I see with that, when all the planets head into Scorpio, is that a person needs time alone, needs to go inside, and other people who love them or around them feel like, oh, they're pulling away from me. They've got a secret. Is it another lover? And usually it's not. It just needs that they're not pulling away from the other people, they're pulling back to themselves. So be careful to check out your suspicions. That doesn't mean people don't have a nefarious private life with those planets in Scorpio. Yeah, but that it may not be that. To get facts, to look at the situation with clear eyes, not, oh, I can trust them completely or I can't trust them, but what's the evidence here? Where are they? Do they need some time alone? Do I need some time alone and stop obsessing on them? And we'll check back in with each other when that moon, goes into Sagittarius, even the next day. So, and those are what I'm seeing. It's going to be a tricky new moon.
Yeah, especially with Mercury retrograde. I feel that every time we have a full moon or new moon and the Mercury retrograde is doing its thing, making
Hmm.
everybody, paranoid and believe in suspicions, like you said, everything gets heightened, especially during the new moon. So I agree with Heather, stay in your lane and focus on yourself.
Hmm.
Maybe try to like do evoke a project from the past or like watch an old TV show that brings back memories, think something that will, I always say during these times, calms your mind.
Hmm. Hmm. And offer comfort. And it also, sometimes Mercury retrograde, we talk about it going back into uh, our own personal history. So it's that the general axiom with Mercury retrograde: anything begins re is good to do. Revisit, remember, reconnect. Uh, Anything that re-edit. Um, but it's not a good time to start brand new projects in general with that Mercury retrograde, but it also sends us back to look at history. We may see echoes of past political problems, how they worked out, what was said then, echoing and coming back to affect us in the moment. Um, I'm thinking of there's an ad that Canada has produced with the voiceover of Reagan talking about tariffs and how tariffs are not good for anybody's economy. And not I've never thought that would Reagan would look good, but compared to this particular political party, it does. He had some good points about immigration being an important and healthy thing, and that immigrants should be welcome in our country because this is the only country you can really immigrate to and become a citizen and feel like an American, because America is such a stew. And he said that tariffs, do harm the country and the economy. And so they have this great ad with him talking over it and pictures of our country setting off bad tariffs. That's going to be playing, I believe, at the Super Bowl and other places where that political viewpoint hasn't been heard in a long time. It's still hard for me to believe that America is going through this. I'm looking at 2014 when America's Constitution goes through its Pluto return. We went through our Pluto return of our country being formed in January 6th at the end of, when Trump finished office and in 2020. And yeah, what a mess. I mean, not in 2020, 24. When, what a mess that was. We saw our country being really challenged, like, are we going to make it through this? And I think that until we get past that Pluto return for the Constitution in 2014, we need to really hold on to that initial vision and to work it and help it come back alive. Whenever Pluto talks to our chart, whenever Pluto's talking to the chart of our country, that what it's talking to can get pushed to the edge, can say, in the face of life and death, why is this here? Is this a good use of power? Is this a good use of life? This could go, you could lose your life. So you want to fight for your life. You could lose your love. Do you want to let it go or do you want to hold on to it and really rebirth it? You can't just go on same old, same old. And so I'm hoping that it is a revivification of our sense of purpose as a country. We'll be talking about that a lot between now and 2014, but that's an ongoing process. I wanted to again go back to Thanksgiving because that is, again, we have very low on earth, very low on water. It'll be a pretty emotional day. I'd say, it's good for traveling on Wednesday, the 26th, when the moon will be in Aquarius, and then the moon goes into Pisces. So, efficiency won't be the point this Thanksgiving. Sentimentality and making people feel safe and reaching out to people that need extra help and, offering l- loving kindness instead of making it difficult to feel like who you are. A lot of emotions will be passing through. And a lot of people comparing this Thanksgiving to Thanksgivings in the past with the Grand Trine and water signs still very strong and Venus forming in that. It's a lot of emotions with Venus taking the heat here. And that instead of getting stuck, feel the emotions if you're thinking about the past, let it pour through you but don't get stuck there. It's like you want to honor the past and honor who's not there at your Thanksgiving table this year or how different the world is this Thanksgiving dinner. And then begin to use some of that imagination to say, and what do we love and how can we vision that moving forward? And just watch that people's feelings will get hurt easily.
Also, Saturn goes direct in Thanksgiving, correct?
Yep, it's stationary that day.
Yeah. So, yeah,
What do
lots
you
of.
see about Saturn turning direct?
I mean, I always say Saturn, as we know, it's considered I wrote the Saturn Return Survival Guide, and Saturn is always what
hmm
people call the daddy planet, but it's really about authority. So when Saturn's in Pisces, we're really trying to find our boundaries. And I think with everything going on, there are going to be a lot of debates, a lot of frustration, typical Thanksgiving conversation this year, for every year since for the past decade. But I think, there are going to be people really asserting their boundaries and saying, let's not talk about that. I don't want to get into that. But, as you said, it's going to be an emotional day and people doing a lot of remembering because Saturn really honors the past. So, I mean, that's every time Saturn goes direct in my family, we always talk about the past. It's very interesting.
Interesting.
So I
And
think
it is, as in the past, is the framework upon which we're built. That it's the foundation. I always think of, I say Saturn rules what you don't have as a baby: bones, teeth, personal authority, and history. All the things you don't have as a baby, and which you grow every time Saturn transits itself, 7, 14, 21, 28, and then every 7 years after that. And 7 years in a relationships, the 7 year itch, we have to really work on restructuring it, looking back. How do we make it strong enough and big enough to handle the next level of growth? It pushes us on growth, but it can, it often, I think of Saturn acting like a martial arts sensei, to test us, to push us, to ask us to grow into that next level, by using our personal discipline. But Saturn really, it looks like often people feel like we're being tested when Saturn's triggered, but it can also feel like, all those tests help you grow. That's the exercise that helps you grow. That Saturn actually believes in us and wants us to develop our personal authority, to develop a strong sense of our own personal history apart from our family, even.
I agree. You know, I think that they always say Saturn is the glue that holds us together when we look at, I think you might have said that to me a while ago, actually. So,
Hmm.
we always look to Saturn, even in relationships, to kind of see if we can like hold the bond or like strengthen the connection. So, and even within ourselves, it's also how we discipline ourselves, like maybe we shouldn't stay up late if we have a meeting at 7 in the morning. Maybe we
Oh,
should brush
that.
our teeth. Maybe we should brush our teeth, just throwing
Yeah,
that out there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do we build disciplines? That's again, I think, the difference between before Saturn, your first Saturn return, and after Saturn return. Saturn return in the late 20s is, about, it's your life. It's not, it's suddenly it's your Saturn. It's not other people imposing their Saturn on you. It's, is it your discipline? Do you brush your teeth because you were told to, damn it, or because you want clean teeth and want to be kissable? Do you
Yeah.
want, are you going to sleep early and not staying up late on that night when you've got that early morning meeting because you want to do it rested and you're stepping into the authority of your own? It's that owning your own disciplines. I think that's a deep part of Saturn.
Well, it's funny. I was born during both of my parents' Saturn returns.
Oh,
So
really? Yeah. So you are their Saturn return.
I really am. I really am teaching them about themselves. I
Hmm.
really am. They're lucky that they have me to
Yes,
discipline
they are.
them.
They
But
are.
it's
And they
true.
probably had to grow up fast. When I see so many times people have a baby right around their Saturn, when they do, they have to grow up quick. I
Well,
had mine way before that. I had mine closer to my first Saturn square, which was too early, but I
well,
had
my
to grow up
mom
fast.
my mom always says, and my dad always says
There's that.
that I'm
Hmm.
always teaching him like different. I keep him hip. Do you know what I mean? Like I teach him all the terminology, and then my mom always says that, I'll. The thing about that connection is that we'll debate things,
Hmm.
and then they'll
Hmm.
see my side of the story. Like
Excellent.
it's only a Pisces and Scorpio can, because they're stubborn in their own ways. So you know, once you kind of dig your heels in with that Saturn, you can make a difference.
And
But
speaking of keeping hip, what would you say for the young people that are coming up and starting to really explore astrology? Where to go, where to look at it, what to notice, who's doing really cool work?
well, I always say that, people should really listen to your podcast and read your work, because you're a very well-known astrologer and you teach
And
all
others
of
too.
us.
Hmm.
So, I always say, like, do your research. Let's, find an astrologer that you connect with, that you get.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
say that going to Reddit on a discussion board and talking about astrology is really a great way to do that, or even have conversations on social media. Any place where you can really converse with other people. and have the live chat about ideas is great. I
Mhm.
belong to several groups on Facebook where, we talk about horary charts and, other things that are happening in astrology. I listen to your podcast. I listen to, other podcasts. And I think that always having an open mind and wanting to learn more is great. And the one thing I love about astrology is that we can always question and ponder the future and
Mhm.
what's in the past. So, to understand what's happening now, we have to look to the past, like Saturn, to gain knowledge.
Mhm. Mhm. Excellent. And when for years I had when I could do it in person in Santa Fe and then New York and then Minnesota, we had a chart clinic where people would come once a month and bring case histories. And we would only let people put up a chart who were there to answer the questions or who knew the person really well so that we could ask them, how did this manifest? What did you see this? Here was the transit then. And people could bring their charts and the group would work on a case history, and that was a chance to really practice on it. We always ask you to use permissive language, like I'm seeing this, this could be happening. Where could we go with this? Rather than to tell people and limit their sense of the future. I used to specialize in what I call bad reading rehab for people that had been to readings or groups and been told that they were stuck heading into a difficult situation and there was no way out, because I don't think that does anybody any service. You can say there's some real issues coming up, deal with it with your eyes wide open, but don't limit somebody's future. But I think that those groups, you said you're doing it on many Facebook and social media groups. And if you can find a group of people and form a study group with a few friends that are at the same level of astrology that you are or a little bit ahead and behind, and take charts and listen to people's stories. Look at the charts, put your theory out on how it was going to work, ask them how it's coming out, take a look at those transits and see how they sit for you. Because that's one of the best ways of learning. You test your theories and then they go, well, actually, no, that's not happening. I remember two examples of clients that came in with their charts with a loaded, Mars, Uranus, Pluto mess down in the fourth house. And I've used this example before, so if you've heard it, forgive me. But uh, they, there was, both of them looked like it could be, traumatic childhood and a real mess. And we asked them, and one of them said, "Why, yes, I had a really traumatic childhood, very dysfunctional family, and that's why I've become a social worker and I work with dysfunctional families because I know what a mess it can be. And I've done my own homework, and now I'm using what I learned from that to help others." Beautiful. The other one said, "No, no, we had a great family. It was fine. My dad was a general, and there were bombs in the basement." So his was very literal. And it's so funny when you get the case histories, how the same patterns can manifest, whether it's, interpersonally, philosophically, or quite concretely. I remember talking to a client who was just about to head out across the country. They're moving across the country. I was the last stop before they left, and this was in New England. And they were uh, they're heading out the door, and I was talking about there was difficulty with the Uranus Mars aspect. That they say you're having trouble shifting gears. It's this change is going to take a lot of attention, that you do the foundation work, that you want to change so many things in your life, but you really need to do the fundamental Saturn work here. And they went out to start their car and their transmission had just blown. They were quite literally having trouble changing gears. So sometimes it can manifest, but that little break, when they had to stop and go back and get their car fixed and get a new transmission, gave them the time to do some adapting and really imagine where they were going, not just leaving New England, but moving to California. What would that be like? How could I make it's safer for me to move. So often we get a very literal version in our daily life that unfolds in more metaphysical versions and more emotional versions, more political versions in the rest of our lives. So look at those metaphors, but I'd say case histories are one of the best ways to learn.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's wonderfully said.
So, if you have any last comments you'd like to make to our astral audience in these last 3 minutes?
Um, just never stop searching and learning. Do what feels best for you, and always take the time to understand yourself. And I always say, while astrology can offer answers, you should also look into your personal psychology as well, and the way that you act in things, because I always say life is nature and nurture. It's a combination of things. So like I said before, always keep an open mind and never stop exploring.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Thank you.
And I'd say to anybody getting into astrology, do your own homework on yourself, your own therapy, your own introspection. Understanding yourself helps you see others more clearly instead of through a filter of your own unfinished work. And that constantly astrology teaches you about yourself.
And
So enjoy.
celebrities.
And celebrities. And they're great examples. Okay, thank you, and we'll speak with you all the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much for having me.
Always great to have you, Lisa. Take care.
Thanks. You too.